okay, flip it to the, go ahead, start it. So the way that we have designed this deck is not as a presentation, it's more of a tool. And the way we think about it is, if an organization, there's folks in an organization who understand the value of a podcast, but not everybody in the organization is bought in, or maybe there's some skeptics or whatever. This tool is created to help help set up a really good case to support a podcast that will align with the organization's goals and purpose. So it isn't very visually appealing as we go through this. You're going to see a lot of copy. And the reason for that is just because it really is a tool that we're going to make available after this session. And what you can do is use this to make your own pitch deck. And so what we have is on the left side is the notes to the deck maker, to you, to help you understand and give you a few pointers and things about what's on the right side, which is basically the outline for your pitch deck. There's only, I think, maybe 12 slides here, so it's pretty beefy, but you'll see that we're going to cover what is really an impact-driven podcast relative to just a podcast. Why now and the urgency for this particular moment. We'll talk about the value, and that's kind of the meat of how you build a case, is really representing the value, and you can kind of pick and choose from things that are most important to your organization. We're going to talk about how we measure success and ROI in the podcast space specifically.
Also, like the main question most folks ask is how do you measure the success of this thing?
Yeah. Like, what's our ROI? And then we'll talk about sort of the team and resources, what it takes to support an ongoing production and sustain it. And then how long it takes to get it into market. That's a big question folks often have, is like, it's a runway, and what does that really look like, and what goes on in that time? And then we're going to get into cost. I'll be very transparent, answer all your questions. Feel free to jump in with questions as we go. This is friendly. I mean, there's only a few of us here, and I'd really welcome any input. This recording will be available on our website, and we'll send it out to attendees. And then, of course, the deck will be downloadable later this afternoon. I've sent it over. So starting with just what is an impact-driven podcast, it's just a podcast that people who are members already of your community, or who have some curiosity about what your organization is about, they're going to be attracted to listening and discovering more. If it's well done, good story, really engaging sound, and it's compelling, they will incorporate it into the rest of their podcast listening library. The goal here really is to ground the podcast in your purpose and help listeners understand the complexity of the issues that your organization cares about. And help them remember how to talk about it. They gain fluency listening over and over. So that really creates advocates, volunteers, donors, and people who want to talk about something that now they've grown passionate around as well. So this is really the power of an impact-driven podcast.
I want to say something about that too, because one of the interesting things about when you think about impact-driven podcast, it's a relationship built over time, right? Mm-hmm. So you're having someone's listening to your, even if it's a little bit tangential to your main mission, they're listening to that week after week. So really building a relationship with your organization over a long period of time.
These are a few of the ones we've made, and you're free to use these obviously as an examples when you're trying to make your pitch, is to say, here's some organizations that have created podcasts that are pretty effective.
One of the things that's important to take a note of is the different formats. The Future of Our Former Democracy is very documentary, kind of This American Lifestyle, whereas Power People Planet is more of a chat show. So it's straight interview, but it's very focused on specific stories for each individual. And then the B teams, our focus was the new leadership playbook. So again, it's a little bit of a mix between the narrative and the interview podcast. So all to say, there's lots of different ways to go about it. And we're really intentional when we think about how to specifically tell a story to the audience that your organization is aimed to reach.
In the case of the B team, they really wrapped a podcast around a campaign that they were rolling out. So this was just 6 episodes, really evergreen, and it supports a bigger campaign launch that that they were focused on at that time. With Future of Our Former Democracy, it's a short 6 episode series. They did that one in Ireland. We're working right now on one in Germany, also 6 episodes. So it's a single story told over multiple episodes. Lots of different ways to use a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like thinking about the urgency now and in this moment for your organization, it really does need to be rooted in the things that your organization is feeling urgent about today and talking about that in the context of podcasts in general, which is that you really, with the constraints organizations are dealing with right now, budget cuts, a lot of pressure coming from, the government, the executive branch primarily. It's kind of it's a time that we really do need to be digging deep. And a podcast serves so many of those pain points in that it is really efficient. It saves time and resources once you build the engine, because for every episode, you're creating a lot of content that can live across multiple channels. It's super efficient that way. So you get a lot of creative assets, a lot of bang for buck out of a podcast production. The other thing that's really important right now is that it's reaching a younger generation and a younger demographic. So those folks that are getting this information, they're really relying on podcasting more and more for truth and for the things that matter to them. So they're seeking podcasts, they're building relationships with those shows and those issues, and they're becoming, they'll become lifelong advocates. We're catching them at an early time in their lives. So this is a really kind of hot moment also for podcasting in that demographic area. And then just the idea of being able to own your message and get ahead of it, because right now there's so much noise in the system, and your ability to really codify your message and your mission
and own that narrative.
And get it out there into ears of people who are really hungry for it in this moment. This is like the really important time. And in this deck, we're including some links to some research that you can also leverage to support this moment and this argument. I don't think that if you waited 6 months, it's going to change. I think the time is now, and the time is anytime in the next, like 6 to 18 months is so critical. And
for mission-driven and impact organizations, primarily because of the sort of devolving funding for public media and kind of, real fact-based journalism.
And DEI and, accurate history, like there's so many issues, certainly climate. So yeah, I think we can all agree this is a moment.
I want to address the saving time and resources really quick, because I imagine you've all heard all of the things in the zeitgeist about video and podcasting and sort of where the industry is going right now. All of our shows do have a video component, and it's really intentional. So there's a differentiation between chat shows done by celebrities and the way that we use video in an impact-driven podcast strategy. So I just want to call that out, that it's included, and it's an important piece because we use the podcast as the source to harvest most of that content. And we will likely get into that, maybe Q&A.
Right. So this is a great place to pack your deck with lots of odds and ends that really are relevant to your organization in terms of advantages that they can that really resonate. So there's 4 here, and then there's some on another page too. And I just really recommend thinking through some of these and incorporating them in your deck as they resonate. But I do want to talk about a few of them. audience reach the neat thing about a podcast is you're able to reach people where they are and in places that you couldn't previously reach them. So TikTok, social media, of course, when people are on their phone, there's so many different competing messages coming through various social channels and avenues. But when they're gardening or walking their dog, the only way you're getting them is right in their ears. And that is a great place to catch people where they're not distracted. They're doing something of low cognitive load, and they're really able to engage in the message that they're hearing. And that's what makes it so memorable and so habitual, because they go back and walk their dog every day, or they do the dishes, or they commute, or whatever. And that's their listening time.
Adding to that, they've also sought out the content. So often they're already interested. So podcast listeners are people who care about what's happening in the world or want to make change or want to learn more are already listening to podcasts. So it's very likely that they're going to be searching for something in that category, whether it's social justice or climate or anything really, that they're intentionally looking to find the content that they want inside that podcast, putting those earbuds on and then staying with it.
So a lot of pushback organizations will give is, we've got a newsletter, we've got a website, we've got all these things. Why do we don't need yet another thing, a podcast? And so the argument that you want to use is, kind of building your case using some of these items in this list. And you want to address the challenge that you'll hear, because a podcast is actually additive to all those things, in that the information, the work and the content that you're building in the podcast feeds all those other channels. It is, you'll harvest out of it. So it isn't it isn't yet another third, fourth, 20th thing that you're making.
You ready to?
Yeah, let's look at the other items on this one. And I've got some good resources here. We've got a few more things we'll add to this for research. It's surprising. There's some other surprising advantages. One is recruitment and just building morale within the organization. People feel really proud of the podcast content and sharing it with their friends and family. And it really gives people in their community a deeper knowledge of what they do all day, every day. So that is a really nice asset. And it helps also recruit. So when people who are passionate about your issues in your organization start listening to the podcast, and it's the podcast coming from your organization, they want to go work for your organization. You become sort of the thought leader and the place to be on those issues. And it's a real recruiting tool. When people interview, they will say, oh, I listen to your podcast and I learned this about your organization.
It's also a great tool for ambassadorship. Like if you're listening to this podcast because you care about, say, electoral reform, which is the case with the future of our former democracy, it's easy to tell your friends, like, I can't quite explain it. Oh, wait, I'll tell you a little bit about it, but really you should listen to this podcast. It's so also a great way to build community and give gifts.
Mm-hmm. Success measuring in podcasting is there's a lot of great data, and you can get a lot of good insight. One of the most seductive data points is the download, and there's a lot of controversy about the download because it's the data that an advertiser uses to determine how, to buy into a podcast, to advertise in a podcast. So that number floats around a lot. And the download number is really bigger than the rest of the data. So it's a seductive number to use. But the more informative data is really around the number of listeners you have. That's unique listeners, individual people who actually put earbuds in their ears and listen to your podcast. That's the most effective and important number. Consumption rate is how long they spent with your podcast. Most podcast listeners stick with a podcast that they like for 75 to 80% of the entire episode. That's basically when it's getting into the wind down and the credits, they stop listening. They've listened to the whole message, and they move through even ads. These most mission-driven podcasts don't have ads, but listeners stick with it, partly because they've got their hands doing something else and they're not grabbing for their phone to skip it. unless this isn't your right audience. So consumption will tell you if you're actually reaching the audience you intend to reach. And if you're not getting a good consumption rate, it's great information. It shows where they drop off, so you can tweak your episode a little bit, or you can retarget into a more effective body, use different tools to reach the actual audience you're trying to get to. So those top two are the most important. You can get great information from demographics. There's lots of great tech now tracking listener data. And then ratings and reviews are really revealing. And so we really look at all those things and chalk them up to help tell a story about how successful a podcast is. The goal in terms of an impact-driven show like this is reach and building affinity, engagement, and long-term advocacy. So it's a long game. You don't just start measuring after the first 2 or 3 episodes. You really start to tell a story after 6, 12, and you'll find that listeners go back into the late episodes that you released months ago. You'll still see traction on that old content. So always be measuring performance over the entire body of the show.
It kind of goes back to the beauty of the medium in general, kind of or earlier slide, in the sense that you're always creating content, you're always creating new content, and it's always out in the zeitgeist. And so watching that measurement grow, and as Joelle said, when you drop episode 5, folks are going to listen to episode 1. Hi, Joel. And hi, Camille. We didn't get to say hi to you too. So folks get to come back to, will often catch you maybe at episode 5, but they're like, oh, wait, there's a whole catalog here. Now I'm going to go back and you can watch that rise. So that's kind of an exciting metric to follow as well.
Mm-hmm. So supporting a podcast production, now, obviously we're biased. We make podcasts, we're a podcast agency. Joel, did you?
Were you talking to us? Oh, no.
Oh, okay. So, this is really how we staff a project and how we think about providing, a full team of support.
Often folks think that it's just sort of a technical solution, that podcasting is a technical solution. It's really important to kind of break that thinking, because really we take a lot of care in the creative piece and the really wrapping our arms around an organization and anybody that you partner with, even if it's internal, you want to really make sure that that's all in alignment. So your producer is the person that leads the production process. They're often in studio. They're always in studio with whoever's hosting the podcast, whether it be someone inside your organization or sometimes people cast hosts. They lead the entire production from idea all the way to publication. So they're your air traffic control. They're the hand holder of the host. They're the steward of the content. And I always say they are the ones that really are going to put all their heart and soul into the show in general, in tandem with your editor. They're going to hold hands. And once the show is all the audio is captured, the editor then takes over. But the producer and editor work hand in hand. We have writers and researchers. Often that comes in early on as well, because we can't be subject matter experts for every topic, right? So often it will take a team that works in tandem with the organization on writing and research. Our sound engineers are obviously, the high quality sound is very important. It's a big ask for people to put earbuds in their ears and listen to you for a half hour or more. So we take a lot of care in the sound engineering. And that person is not only there for capture, but on post-production, they mix it so that all the levels are sounding great. So as we put equipment in studio at the bottom, because it's table stakes, we have a recording studio here, but there's lots of resources that you could use. That's the last problem that you need to worry about, really.
2 things for folks just joining. This is
hi, Corey.
Hi, Corey. And Joel, like a few folks just jumped in. The deck here is really copy heavy. Like, it's not meant as a presentation. This is a tool that we're going to give you, and we're just kind of walking you through how to use it. So the content on the left side is the sort of tips and tricks for the person making the pitch deck. The stuff on the right side is what will go into the pitch deck once you start to build it. So these are sort of the odds and ends that will help you assemble a deck of your own. And we're our goal with this, don't flip the page yet because I have one more thing to say about that.
Okay.
The goal with this is to really enable folks in an organization who are in the position of feeling passionate and recognizing the power of podcasts, but needing to sell it into the organization at a leadership level or at the board level. So one other thing I wanted to say about supporting a podcast production with a team is the importance of the subject matter experts, because those tend to be the folks in the organization already who have deep knowledge of the issues, policy, the complexity of the technical issues, maybe climate, some of the things that are really just not things a podcast production team is ever going to know. So we really, really value the contribution and the input from subject matter expertise. And those folks do need to account for some time in the podcast production to make sure that it's accurate and that it's resonating with a really knowledgeable audience that knows ins and outs of this issue. So they're going to take a lot of care to make sure that what we're producing, what we're saying, how we're producing it, the stories we're telling, and how we're cutting it, even in the editing room, is super accurate to the organization's principles and values and truth.
Yep. So it's a real partnership.
Yeah. Few pro tips when you think about a production timeline. As you staff a team, based on the folks on the previous slide, there may be people within the organization that already play roles that are similar to that or can take on that work. So when you think about cross-functionally how in your organization you're going to support it, be, judicious about who might really have something valuable to bring to bear. And then also factor in their availability. So in that previous slide, each of those roles has some time estimates about what their time commitment should be. But then getting into just a timeline for 10 episodes, sort of how you can think about carving it out, really we put a lot of investment into the development phase. In the first 4 to 6 weeks, really planning the key ideas. What do you really want to say with this podcast over and over and over again throughout its episodes? Who do you want to hear that? Who are these folks? And it's not just basic demographics. It's what do they care about? Where do they live? What else are they reading? What else are they listening to? What secondary habits might they have that you want to be aware of and that should resonate in the podcast so that they know that this is actually for them? That's the audience thinking. And then just being thoughtful about what you want them to do at the end of your podcast. Do you want them to donate? What's your call to action? Do you want them to volunteer? Do you want them to talk about this? Do you want them to get engaged with it in different ways? How do you want them to participate or think about things? So we really are careful about what we do in those first 4 to 6 weeks to craft a podcast concept that's going to be sustainable and successful to reach your ultimate goals. Huge investment time.
And that time pays off because it's also stays with the body of your podcast forever. So season after season, you'll revisit this roadmap that you create in that planning time so that you're really matching to those goals and making sure that you're staying on message. It's very easy when you get deep into a production for somebody to come along and be like, oh, you know what we should do with this podcast? We should interview this guy. And if you have this pre-production work beforehand, you can see, well, now you have a case for saying that doesn't really match up, or, oh, that's a great idea and it aligns exactly with how we plan this podcast.
A lot of people come into podcasting thinking that when you make a because they listen episodically, one after the other, they assume the makers made an episode, launched it, make an episode, launched it. But really what we do is we have multiple episodes being made concurrently, depending on host availability, guest availability, location, a lot of factors, the format. So we'll be making multiple episodes over a period of time. And of course, the first 6 weeks, when you go from nothing to starting something, that's the most time consuming part. To get the first 6 episodes, not 6 weeks, 6 episodes built and kind of moving. Then the production becomes a much more predictable, workable system, and the level of effort drops significantly, and you can kind of get into cruise mode. We recommend launching after you have 4 already baked and fully finished, done, because that gives you, depending on your frequency of publishing, a little runway to be ahead. So you're not worrying about trying to get approval and finish and publish because you've got to have it in the can tomorrow or publish it tomorrow. You really want to buy time for people to take time off, have vacations, holidays, things happen. So always have plenty of episodes already made before you start launching.
Before we go forward, is there any holler if you have questions?
Yeah,
You feel free to just holler out if you have questions.
Yeah, it's a small enough group that we can just
Yeah, we can totally just pause for a minute. And again, a reminder for those of you who just started that this is more of a tool than it is a presentation.
Yeah.
A tool for you to use eventually. And we're to the juicy part of the tool.
Yeah, so this is the numbers slide, and I'll tell you the typical factors that tend to drive budget complexity, or not complexity, but budget dollars to make something range on the higher to the lower end. Format complexity. So a single person just talking into a microphone on a regular basis is definitely less complex than a documentary podcast where you have, say, many contributing voices, sources, audio bites that get baked into something that's more like a documentary style podcast. So that is probably the biggest driver, is the format. The next big driver is the approval process. How many people are going to want to listen and give feedback to the production team while the episode's being made? Multiple revisions, sorting out this feedback over that feedback, the amount of feedback that comes through. Those are things that can create multiple cycles for the production team, which just, burns up time and burns up budget. Can be really valuable because it often, does improve the quality of the product, to the extent that it doesn't start watering down the story. So it's a challenge.
What's interesting about that, and it's kind of just a side pro tip, is that having all those stakeholders there at the very beginning is essential. And then also what's really fun is once you get into production, about 3 or 4 episodes, people stop dropping off in the approval process.
It's true.
If you're doing it right, because they're like, I get it. I get what they're doing. Your team should mind meld with the approvers and stakeholders to the point where they're like, oh, they hate it when we do this, or they really like this, and everybody's aligned on this one thing, so we'll never do that again. And so once you get further in, people really start to light up and get excited about it, and they just can't wait to hear the final and get it out. So things really do change. It's a unique process for that very thing. It's a funny medium, and it will really gel a team together and builds a lot of trust internally and a lot of trust with your production team. So once you get in the groove, all the time and energy for the show starts to really loosen up.
Yeah, for sure. Another factor is in-field recording. We absolutely love to do it. It makes for such great storytelling, but it is, you got to get.
By field recording, we mean, like out of a studio.
Yeah.
Like when more Future of Our Former Democracy, we went all the way to Ireland. But a show we did here in Seattle, we recorded at the Space Needle or, at a park. So that just takes a little bit more time and effort and planning than plan. And we do plan very specifically for interview shows as well. They're just a little bit different beasts.
Yeah. So in-field recording, music licensing. Some shows really benefit from original scoring and original music. Licensing for that can be costly, but worth it. So it's a trade-off, something to consider. And then the other thing we find, especially with our higher corporate organizations, larger philanthropics, or B team, where you had multinational executives all over the world, like that just trying to wrangle those folks into be in the same place at the same time, both prepared with the right equipment and not cancel is tough. And you just have to factor in a lot of schedule changes. So when you're building your budget, account for that. The team's going to be all ready. Somebody canceled. You still have to pay that team to have shown up and been there for that. So, that can be an expensive element when you're working with high level executives, and you just have to plan for that in the schedule, which also affects the budget.
Yeah.
So getting into the right-hand side of things, these are rates that I know are pretty standard for ourselves and our competitors. So when we do this first planning phase, and if you do nothing else, if you work with just your internal team to make the podcast in production, we strongly recommend just hiring experienced podcast production teams to help you with the planning and that initial development phase, because they will save you so much time and pain and frustration on the front end and set you up for long-term success for a much smaller investment of 18 to 22K.
We get a lot of folks in who have invested 6 months into a podcast that they're like, wow.
Yeah. And they're ready to give it up.
They just didn't do that work ahead of time that is nuanced and complicated and really, I know we're biased, but really requires a skilled, someone who's been in this industry for a long time really understands that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you do nothing else, at least do that piece. Production of 10 episodes, that's a crazy range, I realize. And I put that in there because in the lower end, it's just a simple chat show, really. And you can get a lot of content out of a simple chat show. I mean, there's a lot of value. There's great video. You can pull bites. You can create blog articles out of it. It really does, for just that amount of money. And maybe the social media assets out of that are about 10% more. The higher end is more of a documentary show where you've got a team going out, getting voices, doing multiple interviews. So you might have as many as 20 to 30 contributors' voices that you've gone out and picked up audio for. And it's only going to inform 6 to 8 episodes. It's not interview necessarily, but it's definite, a lot of content that goes into that, and scripting, a lot of narrative that goes into it. So you've got a pretty big staff of writers, researchers, and editors on that higher end. Adding video, I ballpark this. We do a lot with shorts right now. That is a really effective way, especially in more
discoverability in YouTube.
Yeah. And also LinkedIn shorts. People watch them and learn a lot about the mission, and they may not ever go back to the podcast. It isn't necessarily even an avenue to drive audience to the podcast. It's more just to expand the message and the
mission of the organization,
and catch people wherever they are for that information. So it is a worthy investment more and more in this industry, to leverage the video if you can capture it. Audience development, that is more around PR and organic growth. So elevating the podcast into the players for features, doing a lot of outreach in PR. So getting media picked up, getting the host to be invited on other shows to guest. You really do have to pay a PR firm or an agency to help get that done. And those generally, that can be around $1,000 to $2,500 per episode. Typically, PR agencies charge a retainer of somewhere between $4,000 and $8,000 a month for a minimum of 3 to 4 months. And that's a good thing to do at the beginning of your show when you're first launching it. And you might even another couple months or a year in do another push, but it's an effective way to really get the volume that you're looking to get on your podcast early on and build long-term listeners. Wait, go back.
Sorry.
I wanted to get into just the paid, which is not a necessity, but it is an opportunity to also really get volume on a podcast that you really want to get out globally or nationally. A paid campaign over, 3 months or so is also a very effective thing. You will see traffic drop off because paid tends to hit a much broader audience, and they'll listen and sample and perhaps aren't necessarily the right audience. You have to kind of test and make sure you're targeting into the right space there. But this is kind of generally the cost that you'll encounter from an agency. Any questions there?
Yeah. Any questions about anything that we've covered, or maybe something that you thought of before you registered and were like, oh, I'm registering because I have this big question, or I hope they cover off on something? You can put them in the chat or just holler.
I didn't realize my phone was going off. So.
Oh, you know what, you guys? I realized when we started, we didn't introduce ourselves.
Oh.
It's a funny thing. Joelle and I are sisters. I'm Tina. This is Joelle. I'm a lifelong producer and audio journalist from way back in the day, and started the company about 14 years ago. So I run the creative side of Larj Media, and Joelle is co-owner and runs the operations side of the company. So you could probably tell a little bit of that during the presentation in terms of who does what, but.
Yeah. We'd love to know if you find this deck useful, if you're able to use it, if you're going to put it to use and you need more support, you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them or help you tweak it if you want to reach out to me.
If you want me to make it pretty, you could reach out to me. No. Just kidding.
You have to make it pretty yourself. But yeah, that is our our show for today. I will get it all bundled up and you'll receive it. I'm thinking, I don't know if I have emails for everybody who registered. So if I don't, I'll ping you in LinkedIn and make sure you have a way to get to it that way. We're also going to post the video and the whole thing.
Thanks for coming, Joel.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for coming. We'll post it on our blog page too, so you can see it there if ever. A delight.
Just in case some of the shows we produce
Human Group
with our podcast, maybe yes, yeah, that's true, great point. Yeah, really, Camille, when your host is the leader of the organization, it can be a really powerful tool to help them build their personal brand and build those relationships.
Any host really often, and it's not a total stretch to turn the podcast into a TED Talk. Mm-hmm. You can kind of distill a lot of the themes and stuff out of a podcast and build a TED Talk out of it.
And it's really interesting because really early on in my career, I worked with people that were never behind a microphone, and one of the things that I'm just incredibly passionate about and know a lot about in terms of this medium, the intimacy of the medium really requires that person, that leader, to be warm and to really understand the medium very deeply. So we do a lot of work with our hosts to get them, to help them and support them behind the microphone. We're working with a high up Microsoft executive right now. And, she's very used to publicly speaking, but this medium is totally different. So it's important to do a lot of that pre-work with these executives or with these leaders to get them comfortable behind the microphone so that they're making a show that is inviting to the audience they want to reach. And it's not for them. It's the gift to other folks. So that's a really great point. And it's an incredibly powerful tool for brand building, business relationship building, and that kind of thing. Yeah. I think Camille's typing. So we'll stick around for a little bit.
Sometimes Teams does that.
Yes,
Yeah.
the podcast becomes a product for sure. One thing that I realized a long time ago that kind of dawned on me, and we were working with Nick Hanauer, I was like, it's funny because he has all this access, right? Like he could talk to Cory Booker or Joe Biden at any point. He had access to these folks. But what he didn't have access to prior to the podcast was other people hearing that conversation. And the power of that alone really amplified his work and the mission of civic action. So
Yeah.
that is
It gave him access to many more.
And then other clients that have built, because they've interviewed, there's an intimate time that they have, this 1 hour concentrated time where they've researched the person. That person feels very welcome into this space. Now they're having a really important conversation that's a gift to the rest of the audience. That's a lot of power there. And so they've built a relationship. And now, in fact, with Vita Agency, we had Ruchika in, and Amalia, the host, they do yoga now together, like they're buddies, and they're both two very powerful women in the sector that they're in right now. And that relationship is just incredibly important, and it would not have happened had she not been a guest on the podcast. They might have met in a networking thing, but
Had
it's
a
like
5-minute
it's a whole different thing
conversation.
when it's like, I've read all about you, I looked at your book, I'm
Yeah.
ready to talk to you, I'm inviting you in, we're going to share this with an audience, and people are going to respond. And that is incredibly
big
powerful for an
difference.
organization and for a mission. So you make great points, Camille. Thank you.
Yeah, really nice to have you. We weren't at Podcast Movement this year, so that's the last time we saw you.
Yeah.
But we'll be at the next one.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys, you'll get this. Bye,
Thank you.
Joel. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot for coming.
Yep.
And Rachel, thanks for your support. It's a delight to see you.
Yes.
Yes, it was really helpful, and I understand there was a lot of parallel to video production and
Yeah.
the podcast, and I do understand the value of all the prep and the great quality recording and prepping the host and flow of the narration, just the narrative, and asking the right questions. So yeah, I mean, was amazing. I loved all the information, and I love the production sheet of what it actually takes to make that, and the budget and everything. So yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Let's collaborate on something.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah,
go
I
make
love
something
that.
together.
Cool.
I would really love that. Yeah,
Me too.
my wheels are turning, so I'm gonna
Good.
be
Mine
thinking
too.
about something. Yeah.
Good.
Well,
Thank
a
you.
delight to see you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Have a fabulous day, y'all.
Bye-bye, everybody.